I hope you had fun finishing up your clues from last month. This month is relatively easy. We don't have a whole lot of work to do. Just wait till next month. Oh, I didn't say anything. Okay, you'll see. First of all, we were asked to reserve some of the fabric from the pieces we cut last month. And now we need to cut 2 rectangles. And the size of those rectangles is 17 and a quarter by 10 inches. So that's kind of an odd size. But I've already gone ahead and straightened this one side of this. And I'm going to turn the fabric and straighten the other side at a right angle so that we get it started. And here again is why I absolutely love this ruler, because it just doesn't budge on you. And I can line this line up right along with that cut edge and cut this angle right across here, straighten it out. Then I'm going to turn this. The other thing, you see what this mat has a smooth surface, so I don't even have to pick up my ruler. I can just turn it. The ruler stays put and the fabric slides on there, and I can line this up. So the next stage is I need to come up here 17 and a quarter inches. So I'm going to get 17 and a quarter. So I'm at 17 and a quarter here. I'm going to take my tailor's chalk just to mark that. And then I'm going to turn this and go my 10 inches. Get my 10 inches marked right there. And then I can line this up and cut that next piece. Okay, so other than this last seam here, or cut, the last cut right along this line, that will give me my 17 and a quarter by 10 inch rectangle. Now you'll notice, well maybe you didn't notice, but I'll show you. I cut this 2 at a time. So I've got wrong sides together. Now for this clue we need 4 triangles, 2 going one direction and 2 going the reverse. So if you cut these individually, you would cut one going diagonally from corner to corner this way, and another rectangle you'd cut from corner to corner this way. But since they are already wrong sides together, all I have to do is cut diagonally one way. I can go across here. You see how that ruler grips so nicely? So what that does is these 2 are cut this way. These 2, you see it's upside down, are the reverse. So that's what we need for this fabric, are these 2 that are reverse and 2 that are regular of these triangles. The next thing we're going to do is to border one side of this with a border print fabric. And with that, keeping that in mind, we're going to need to talk about the border print. This is the teal version that I'm working on for this quilt. And you'll see, let me pull out the border. I'll just talk a little bit about these borders. I make a wider stripe that usually is meant to go around the outer edge of a quilt. Then I'll do a narrower stripe that's I usually put a narrow stripe, another fabric in between, and then a wider stripe. So I always plan that there are at least 4 repeats of the wide and 4 repeats of the narrow stripe, so that you don't have to buy extra yardage to get that 4th piece to go around the 4 sides of your quilt. You will see here, if we undo it, that there are wide stripes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide stripes in this particular border, and 4 narrow stripes. I deliberately designed these borders with seam allowance included so that you're not cutting into the decorative part of a stripe to get your seam allowance. So I always have at least half an inch in between the stripes. So that will allow for your seam allowance. If you're using this stripe all the way out to this point, that will allow you your seam allowance so you can sew right up to that stripe. This particular stripe is a little bit wider. It's actually about 3/4 of an inch wide. So you have plenty to work with there. The first job for you to do, and it's just a little tedious, but it's not that bad, you're going to have to cut these stripes apart. You'll have to trim down later to get your 1/4 inch, but just initially, so you don't make any mistakes, I would advise you just cut down the middle of this. If you're slightly off 1/8 of an inch one way or the other, it isn't going to matter because we're going to be cutting that exact 1/4 inch later on. But just to separate the stripes, because it's going to be how we're going to be working with them in the quilt. So I'm going to cut some stripes, and I will be right back with you in a minute, and we'll show you the next step. So the next stage in this month's clue is to cut the border fabrics. You've already sliced them apart, the wide and the narrow stripes, but now we need to cut some pieces out of the narrow stripe that are going to be sewn onto those triangles that we just did. Now again, this is a pretty long piece, so it comes in 3 sections. So you're going to have to line up those sections. First of all, I'll line up this because that arrow will fit next to there. So I'm lining up the dotted line and putting, oops, just want to get it exact. Put a piece of tape on one side, carefully turn it over, put a piece on the other side, and then make sure that all these pieces are right side up. Then I'm going to do this one down here, this template DDR. Once again, put tape on that side, turn it over, put tape on this side. Now, because we had 2 regular and 2 reverse triangles, we're also going to have 2 regular and 2 reverse border pieces. So we're going to take one of the narrow border print pieces, and you're going to line this up. Just going to lay the template on top of the border print, and then we're going to mark some portion of the design directly onto the template so that when we cut another piece, you can cut exactly the same spot. I'm just going to get this sort of little feathery part here. Go ahead and mark the feather so I can just line that up the next time I cut it out. And then you're going to cut this piece. But when we go to cut the reverse one, you can just turn this upside down for the reverse, and you're going to find the mirror image portion where you mark that. You have the same exact spot, and you're going to mark around it, line it up, and so that you have a second one that's the exact reverse. Now I pre-cut a couple of these here so you can see what I've got. There's the one piece. Oops, that wasn't the one. And here's the reverse. So you can see how they end in exactly the same spot. If we put them on top of each other, right sides together, you would see they would fit like this. So that's all we need. Those two cut one way, 2 that are the reverse. And now we're going to pin those to our triangular pieces. Now, here again, we're going to want to mark the dots. You don't need to worry about burning the holes or using the hole punch, because these are common angles used in patchwork and they will fit with a perfect piecer. So this sharp angle right here should be 30 degrees. And you can see how that 30-degree lines exactly up with that. Now I don't want to do it just yet because I don't want to mark on the right side, which I almost did. So you learn this lesson too. You want to mark on the back side. So let's start over here. We'll take the piecer, find that 30-degree angle, which is this one. It's marked 30. Line it up right there, you see, with the whole angle, and then where that hole is on this is where the seam allowances would cross. Let's go ahead and mark all of them while we're at it. This one down here, you just keep working, is going to be your 60 to you. Sometimes if you're not sure what the angle is, just keep turning till you find the right one. But this is the 60-degree angle. And I'm going to mark a hole right there for that. And then down at this end, which we don't need for now, but you'll need it for later, so we might as well mark it, is the 90-degree angle. That right angle goes there. So there we have those dots on the 3 parts of that triangle, and let's do it over here. This side is the 30-degree, which we already used on the other. It goes right here. This is not one of the common angles we have in patchwork. I'm going to show you yet another way to find that angle. I can lay the 1/4 inch, go right along the line here, and I can mark it with the blue tailor's chalk. I can take the 1/4 inch. Now you see it, before I did it on one of the select rulers, now I'm doing it on the perfect piecer. As long as I've got a 1/4 inch line there on a ruler, on any ruler that you have, you can line it up to the edge of the piece. And you see this point where the seam allowances cross is the angle that you're wanting to line up when you sew these pieces together, okay? So there's various ways you can get those angles, and this is just another one. And down here is the same deal, 60 degrees, which is this one. And here we have the 120-degree that goes up here. And if you need, the nice thing about working with these border prints, this line, you don't have to worry about the seam allowance. You're going to sew just right along the edge of that particular piece. And if you haven't trimmed this piece to a 1/4 inch from the edge, you should do so, because remember I told you how that intermediate stripe for the seam allowance is a little wider, so you want to trim this down so you've got only that 1/4 inch from the edge of the stripe to the edge of the piece. So now what we're going to do is, here is the piece that we've marked. Here's the piece that's going to go on here. And we're going to once again line up the dots like we did before. So this is pretty much a straightforward, similar thing. You're going to mark through the dot, and you're going to find the dot on the other side. That was where those seam allowances crossed. Bring the pieces together. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to line up the dots. So they're odd angles, so that's why it's important to mark these dots. Get them exactly lined up. We want to pin from the other side because we're going to sew, whenever you're sewing a border print on, you always want to sew from the border print side, because that way you can line up and sew right along the edge of the seam. I'm going to just put the needle or the pin in here. And if you want to watch me sewing, you can go back to last month's clue, because that's all exactly the same thing, sewing this line together as we did last month with those long pieces. You're just going to start at the edge, Just sew right along the edge of that dark brown line on the piece till you get to the other edge. So I've already pre-sewn a couple of these pieces so you can see what happens. I did the same thing with the pressing that I did last month. So you set the seam and then you open it out, press towards the border print because that's the darker of the two fabrics. And you're going to have two going this way like this, and you're going to have the other two, which are the opposite, like this. You see this is the same, this is the mirror image. So that's your homework for this next month. You're going to sew these pieces, these 4 triangle pieces with the border print on it, 2 going one way and 2 that's the reverse, and get all that done plus last month, because next month it's going to be maybe a little bit more time consuming. Don't worry, those of you who are thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to show us applique. We have no applique in this quilt this month or this year. I decided, since some of you kind of complained last year about the applique, we would forego it this time. Maybe next year, we'll see. Anyway, have fun, and we will see you next month.